Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the last day of the last opportunity for going to regionals in North America. My name is Frodan. I'm joined by Robert Wing as well as That's Admirable. And it's time for Trump versus Firebat. You couldn't have painted a better picture to wrap up these top 40 tournaments so far. Robert, how are you enjoying everything so far?
I'm loving it, and I can't think of a better way to end this whole North American qualifier tournament than win a grudge match that probably no one has ever considered. You think to yourself, Reynad versus Amaz. You think to maybe a couple of other rivalries, and then you're like, Trump versus Firebat. So...
Yeah, for me, this is really a story of the best player last year versus what I would consider the most improved player over the last year or so. Trump, was primarily known as an arena player for a very long time. But in the last year, we've seen him prove to be one of the best constructed players in the world. And so now holding kind of two different sort of auras about him in Hearthstone, really just kind of an all-around master in that regard.
Absolutely. He's asserted himself a lot. He's been dedicating himself to practicing. You can see his streams through. Sometimes he's not even just playing the game. He's studying his own plays or he's studying other people's plays, really trying to find out what makes other players tick or even how these decks operate. Trump has a very scientific approach to Hearthstone, and a lot of his fans really love him for it. But a person that was the scientist before Trump was Firebat. He's a player that people know primarily for maybe some of his casting, maybe some of his tournament wins, but even before all that, Firebat was the one putting the thousands of hours prepping for tournaments. He had spreadsheets and all this kind of data that he compiled over dating from last year's Standing to Conquest. I peg him as the favorite here. I think Firebat's still in my top 5 players in the world at the moment.
Yeah, I don't have any question about it. I think he just performs phenomenally and stays on top of his game and keeps a great network of players that help practice with him as well as learn from what he's got going on. And just doing a lot for the scene in general. He's also hosting his own open tournament.
That's right.
Filled it up. Over 1,000 players going to be playing in that one. Just kind of all around being a great guy and what a great person to see in the community, as well as being able to stay on top of the game in terms of talent.
Yeah, it's really cool to see Firebat take his role in the community. He's only 19 years old, and he won the World Championships just as, on the eve of becoming an adult there. And, I was talking to him. I was like, well, you can also just be more than the world champ. He's like, that's right. I can host my own tournaments and try to really give back to the community. And he's doing that with his Firebat Swiss, right? He's trying to do some open tournaments and instruct some people, give them some coaching as well. Good stuff all around. Trump also doing the same. His educational videos, his free-to-play climbs. People really look at that as some of the easiest content to access Hearthstone in the very beginning. He's even doing it now. He's playing a free-to-play priest and trying to climb that to ladder. And people always think like, well, nowadays with all this new content, can you even really do free-to-play? Trump's trying to prove that.
Yeah, no, it's one of the things we hear a lot, especially on the community end. People really look to Trump as kind of a pillar of what can be accomplished, kind of stress testing how far you can take free-to-play decks, how much you can actually get accomplished. And Trump, I think, is one of the probably the most well-known player in the community as far as educational content goes.
Yeah, the biggest criticism against Trump when he does his free-to-play stuff is no one's that good when they're playing free-to-play decks. And it's like, well, come on, he's trying to make a point here, guys. They're like, well, obviously the new players might not make those plays exactly, but he's trying to show them the way. And that's what ultimately brings us here. We have a match between Trump and Firebat, and it's going to be truly epic. And also another way that you guys can feel epic is if you get some cool discount prices on Amazon App Store card back discounts. Go to Amazon.com/Hearthstone and save some money while you buy some packs. What you do is to get some Amazon coins, you get some money back on those Amazon coins, and then you use those coins to buy it, and you get a rebate on that too. So twice the discount. Now that's value.
Yeah, I think Trump would definitely approve of the amount of value to be had here. Of course, he wouldn't craft golden cards with all those packs he'd be buying. He'd be making sure to fill out his collection first. But maybe you're more like me and you want those golden cards.
That's right. I've actually gotten into the golden card train. Recently unpackaged a golden Justicar True Heart. Really happy about that one just because tanking up never looks so glorious with a golden Justicar True Heart.
Yeah, I'm
Robert doesn't have any golden cards, period. He actually just disenchants
I was just waiting my turn before I listed off all the golden cards I have.
We actually have Robert's list.
They don't actually pay Robert money for his job at Blizzard. They pay him in golden cards.
I mean, I wish that was the case. That's all I'm going to say. Those golden cards are really, really pretty.
Okay, fair enough. Well, I assume that that's going to be the case when you actually have such a stunning outward appearance yourself, Robert. It just seems everything about you is very golden, so I can dig it.
I would say more shiny than golden, although the makeup lady has certainly done her best to try to mitigate the
No worries.
piercing glare.
One more match, Robert, and we're home free. But I hope this one lasts a while because Trump versus Firebat is going to be pretty awesome. So make sure to get out there, hashtag Road to BlizzCon. Let everyone know Trump and Firebat, only one can go to the North American Regionals.
Yeah, I mean, this is the kind of matchup you wait for all year long. One of the biggest names out there versus one of the biggest accomplishments that's out there as well. This is a rare treat to see. Get out there and tell your friends this is happening. Maybe they haven't been watching all day like you have. Well, now's your opportunity to tell them about the best match that we're about to have. The last one today, Trump versus Firebat.
Yeah, and if you have been watching all day together, give each other a kiss on the cheek and a pat on the back, because it's quite an accomplishment. We've been doing this for a long time. Some people have been watching from Europe all the way through NA. They've been tweeting me like, I've been watching all of Europe and all of NA. Thank you so much. And I was like, no, guys, I'm just doing my job. But thank you so much for your dedicated, fandom. This is kind of crazy that so many people enjoy watching Hearthstone and get to share the joy that we get.
Yeah, I wonder who's watched through all 9 days of it.
How about the people who also watch through some of the Asia tournament too? Because that's going on through while we cycle.
I fell asleep watching that one.
Yeah,
last night.
I was watching Waning Moon versus Chalk, and I believe TJ and Doa were casting along with Papa Smith. They're doing a great job over there in the Philippines. Hearthstone all over the world, but the big focus at the moment are 2 North American stars. Let's start off with Warrior versus the Handlock. Now keep in mind that Trump doesn't have Warrior in his lineup. He's taking the Neas point of view here. He wants to go through the road without playing that Warrior class. Can he do it?
Well, we already saw Nias make it through playing against Bloodyface, but maybe face off against Firebat, some place where maybe you do want a Warrior to be in there. But I can venture to say that if there's a player who's clever enough to have a lineup targeted at beating Warrior, Firebat's definitely one of them. So Trump's kind of gone the extra mile here and wanted to be the guy who's not getting targeted by the people trying to beat Grim Patron. He wants to be the guy targeting them. Yeah. So I actually don't mind his lineup so much. I think it's pretty well constructed, and it's not a question he's come this far.
Yeah, when you look at what Trump has as opening hand, he's obviously taking a long time kind of considering what he wants to keep. This is a very important match for him, and I'm sure he understands that the win condition for Handlock is to try to get out of those big swing turns off Void Caller that bring out these large minions that are difficult for the Patron Warrior to deal with, or just get out those big early Mountain Giants and Twilight Drake, of which he has one of each in his hand.
Yeah, he's got those early game threats. Firebat does have one of the responses, though, with the execute. And it's not even necessarily about just the threats themselves, but it's about how you're able to protect them and make sure that you push for it. We've seen multiple approaches. We've seen some people just go threat after threat and pound the tempo. We've seen some players be very defensive and slow. And Trump is one of those players who have spent extensive time at Handlock. So much so that top players even consider Trump one of the best Handlock players out there.
Yeah, on Firebat's side, I think it's interesting. Every single time I've seen him play this Patron deck, he's immediately put out that turn 2 unstable ghoul. Admiral, do you have any insight as to why that might be? Yeah,
he's one of these guys that really likes to get development on the board, and a big proponent of the fact that if you have stuff out, it means you can get value from it. The other thing that happens is when you play your cards this way, it really gives your opponent a different perception of what your range is. He's not always going to be playing unstable ghoul on turn 2, but I think against more thinking players, he's more apt to play it in a situation like this, even if he doesn't have Acolyte of Pain to add right back behind it. Because what does Trump now think that he has? Trump's a very clever player who is going to think about what his opponents are going to do, and maybe Firebat's trying to give him the illusion that he has cards in his hand that he actually doesn't have.
Sure, and force him into a line of play. Same thing as representing the Druid combo. Force him to a line of play where he has to be really defensive and suboptimal. You take a look at the Frothing Berserker also played on turn 3 here. It's something that if his opponent had the proper response, he'd be able to answer it. But Trump chooses to pass. You can have your Frothing for a turn.
Yeah, I think that's interesting, but Trump kind of realizes that it's unlikely that Frodin's going to put like an Inner Rage, a Whirlwind, and just kill him outright. If Firebat, for some reason, decided he was just going to go all in right now, he'd probably get him to about 10, which would be right in Molten Giant range. So,
yeah.
Interesting to me that Trump didn't decide to put out the Twilight Drake.
Yeah, he wants to go for Twilight Drake now or into Mountain Giant now and then coin out the Sunfury Protector. Both are options.
Second Mountain Giant is a pretty big pickup, I would have to say, for Trump.
Yeah, I think he was looking at going Twilight Drake on turn 4 to turn 5, Mountain Giant, Sunfury Protector, and really putting Firebat to the test on exactly what his limits are. And kind of seeing the way this hand is going to pan out, I think this is actually a pretty excellent plan. Doesn't have a lot of board clears. Doesn't have a ton of utility in his hand. He's really just working off of big minions. So trying to get the most value you can out of these may be a good idea, but this is really where Firebat's going to try to do something about that. I would suspect Battle Rage and Executor both coming this turn.
Yeah, to be able to cycle through and keep the Frothing Berserker alive and get the damage in is pretty huge. 7 is still not that bad. Or sorry, 17 is not that bad for the handlock to be in for the Warrior because they still can't play that Molten Giant any cheaper than they can play the Mountain Giant.
Yeah, and now this is kind of a situation where Trump is really going to have to be careful.
Yeah.
Because, you know, these Ironbeak Owls, a lot of times you want to use these in situations like maybe on some Grim Patrons, maybe on an Acolyte of Pain. This isn't a card you just want to burn, but versus a 7 power Frothing Berserker,
Right.
I'd be pretty hard-pressed to not Ironbeak Owl this right now.
Absolutely. I think Trump was, in a way, okay taking that damage because it helps accelerates the threat that we're talking about. You know, the threat train where you just keep whacking big minion after big minion. And ultimately, he hopes that Firebat, by using things like Execute early on, can't get past the bigger minions of taunts when he can lay it down in the future turns.
Right, and on the follow-up turn, he does have that Mountain Giant, and as you guys pointed out, because Firebat went ahead and put that 7 into his face, he is also closer to the being able to play the Molten Giants outright, and maybe this is kind of a situation he does want to be in, where he can just keep a steady stream of these big threats rolling out, especially, as you point out, his hand doesn't really have, like, Shadow Flame, there's no Hellfires. He needs to kind of get a little bit more on the aggressive, and Firebat's doing a really good job of making sure he keeps cards in hand with these Battle Rages.
There's an Execute.
Yeah, the Execute is also something that you have to be very careful with. The timing of it is so key because that's your last Execute, and then your opponent can play with the knowledge that you have no more Executes remaining in your deck or hand. On the other side, too, Firebat's playing a little bit more aggressive because this is a bad matchup, generally speaking. The handlock player is favored the longer the game goes.
Wow, Firebat actually going to choose to take 8 damage.
Maybe even more.
To put some 3 points of damage on that Mountain Giant. This is really interesting to me. This sends a pretty darn big statement that Firebat, he's kind of doing 2 things here. Number 1, it really looks to Trump like he doesn't have an Execute. And number 2, that life that he's paying really is kind of inconsequential. Trump is not the aggressive deck in this matchup.
Yeah, and I like that. I like that Firebat is constantly trying to seek ways to be aggressive because if he's given a chance to kill his opponent, he can. He still is missing that Warsong Commander, though, ultimately, which is really challenging because without the Warsong Commander, ultimately you're just a board control deck. You're not a deck that ultimately threatens to end the game. So that's why you can see Firebat really aggressively cycling through his deck through Battle Rage. People are like, well, do you really want to use Inner Rage there? Do you really want to, you know, toss out the Unstable Ghoul like that? And I think yes, because you have to cycle through your deck very aggressively in order to get to your win conditions.
Yeah, these plays, Trump's very much giving some thought as to what he's supposed to read from these plays, because these are definitely not what you'd expect to be seeing from the Patron player this early on. So Trump takes a fair bit of time trying to kind of figure out what he can get out of this. Decides if he should follow up with maybe a second Mountain Giant, but it looks like he wants to go with the Emperor Thor's hand, which overall is just across the board kind of the stronger, more consistent play.
Well, I guess if you look at it, is there a better time to play Thorzen as the game develops more? Warsong Commander comes into the hand. That could potentially be very dangerous in the next coming turns. But I don't think this turn it means anything, though.
Yeah, I mean, that certainly is a big draw, though. I mean, Firebat now piecing together quite a strong hand. You know, still has an Execute, is facing down an Emperor Thorson. But at this point, I think it's a matter of, you know, how exactly he thinks he's going to piece this damage together. Part of the problem is he has used an Inner Rage and he has used a Frothing Berserker. You know, that's one of the ways he's dealt so much damage and gotten to this point. But still pretty darn scary for Trump. You know, doesn't want to just get too crazy developing his board here. Doesn't want to overcommit to anything. Just a couple of draws could really change the outcome of this.
Absolutely.
But, you know, step number 1 is going to be getting through taunts if you're in Firebat's spot.
That's a really handy draw, I would have to imagine. It allows him to just get rid of that Mountain Giant very conveniently via the Cruel Taskmaster Battlecry ability. And he can, yeah, he'd probably just have to armor up after that, but he clears board, puts down something of his own, and then can start looking to maybe equip that Death Bite next turn and start setting up a possible lethal in the next couple turns.
The problem with the current state of the game, though, is that Trump's at half health, meaning that Molten Giants will always be a threat. And Firebat's not necessarily well equipped to deal with more than one threat at the moment. He's going to have to pair it at one at a time. He can execute one, develop something else. And then if Trump ever gets to the point where he's like playing Molten Taunt, it's like, well, it's going to be really tricky to get past, especially that he just used one Frothing Berserker.
Right, and he taps right here, but he can actually just play down both Molten and Mountain Giant, and might be what he chooses to do. He does have the one Taunt Giver as well, so this would set up a big wall, and he knows that Firebat's already used one Execute, so how do you get past that second wall, basically?
The most damage he could generate if he's able to execute isn't enough, though, because the Frothing Berserker and the Warsong and they execute 7 mana, so that only gives him 1 more mana Whirlwind.
Right. It would be surprised if we don't see Firebat equip a Death Bite and actually start hacking into these giants. His HP is high enough, and that's removal. You've got to get them off the board.
Yeah, you really do. It's just such an interesting spot to be in, to see Firebat so very willingly taking 8 points of damage to attack a minion just to deal at half of its health.
Yeah, and even more. I mean, this Mountain Giant could realistically deal 24 damage in order for Firebat to find his win. And the biggest problem is Trump has the ultimate Trump card in the Mal'Ganis.
Yeah, I mean, that Defender of Argus also pretty significant pickup at this point.
Yeah.
He was out of taunt givers, but now he's got 2 Ancient Watchers, and he can make them 5/6 taunts, which is a major deal. I mean, prior to that, this game was actually looking like it could be pretty grim.
Yeah, possibly.
It happened.
Yeah. We keep ending up in Patron Town.
Yeah, well, I mean, not really. We're still a couple miles away and running out of gas.
I was more talking about what Admiral said.
Oh. Well, I thought we were just going along the metaphor because no patrons are yet to be seen.
Sure.
It's true.
Population 0.
Yeah, and it looks like he's considering what you guys said, which is the Ancient Watcher, or the Ancient Watcher. The Ancient Watcher, he doesn't play both now. He just makes 1, 3, 4 times.
Yeah. He doesn't want to give any chance for his opponent to gain extra damage. And Firebat could be looking at game number 1 in the books here. Second Grim Patron is not going to be any more helpful than the first one. Emperor Thor isn't to stall for time, but he can't even play the No Mission Vendor to draw an extra card. This is looking very bad for Firebat.
Yeah, let's see. So he could possibly look at, I mean, I'm not sure he wants to do this, but he could look at Shadow Flaming the Ancient Watcher to get rid of the Emperor. And then he doesn't have to trade any of his damage in, because it's a little bit clunky if he chooses to trade both the boosted Sun Fury Protector and the Defender of Argus. So let's see, how much damage is he pushing? Yeah. All right, so he's still a little bit off lethal, probably a couple turns. Might just be better to play Mal'Ganis and trade the 3/3 and the 2/3 in to get rid of Emperor Thor's hand just to be safe. That's at Firebat's hands right now. Could generate quite a few patrons on the next turn, but he's going to be at very low HP.
I like trading both these minions as well, just making sure that you don't give him more chances to power the board than necessary. Although realistically, a 3-attack minion shouldn't be that big of a deal, but I don't mind the extra insurance. Also, look at Trump just being like aggressive to tap as much as possible.
You gotta get that value.
He's been tapping every single turn he can, and in the face of the possibility that his opponent might kill him.
Well, this is really the big test, is if Firebat can get this done. I mean, can make 4 Grim Patrons and they will have charge, but is that enough to really crash through all this? I mean, it will let him take out this Mal'Ganis, take out the Ancient Watcher, but he'd have nothing left afterwards.
Yeah, he's going to need some extra help off the top. Trump sees that his opponent does have the Grim Patron Warsong combination. Also, this is going to hurt a lot.
Let's see what he actually does here, because he doesn't have the ability that I can tell to make any more patrons. So this is...
Oh, gotcha. He couldn't even kill it off because he didn't go for the second Grim Patron, right?
Yeah, I think
so this is going to be game 1 to Trump.
Yeah, he felt like he needed that second Grim Patron to make better use of it, and Trump got the extra 1 point of damage in his hand. Starts out 1-0 versus the world champion.
Yeah, and we kind of talked about before, and obviously this weekend has seen this matchup a lot. One of the best ways for Handlock to get ahead of the Patron is to just end up drawing in really early into those big threats, and he kept putting them out, he kept making taunts, and Firebat drew into some combo pieces to maybe win the game. He drew into the Patrons by the end, but he had taken so much damage trying to face those Mountain Giants with the axe that he was just in a really bad spot and unable to stabilize.
Yeah, I think ultimately when you look at that hand that Firebat had, it had a lot of meat, but not a lot of ways to support that meat. So he got the most important parts: the Warsong Commander, the Grim Patron, the Frothing Berserker. However, he was missing a lot of the keys that really made that engine go, right? A lot of the oil that adds enhances to it, the whirlwinds. He had to use his executes early on, and that has to do a lot with Trump making sure that he places the threats and continues to push onto his opponent. But also, I think it's a testament to the fact that he was able to get those threats so consistently because he emphasizes things like tapping and making sure they can dig deeper into his deck, so he has resources at all times to increase his option pool. And that's something that a lot of Handlock players, they start backing away. They're a little bit shy. Like, I don't want to tap. I don't want to lower my health too much. I'm afraid of what this Patron deck can do to me. And Trump took advantage of that and said, you know what, I'm just going to go for it. And if he can kill me, fine. But at the same time, there's a slight chance that he won't do it. So I'll be okay.
Yeah, one of the strengths of Handlock is that it's probably the only deck in Hearthstone that can kind of go toe-to-toe with Patron in terms of drawing cards, allowing it to find those tools, as you said, and put out those big creatures, put up those walls, and then ultimately allow them to beat the Patron.
Yeah, a big part of that, too, was Trump's patience in that one. Waiting on the Twilight Drake, not corning it out straight away, and then allowing him to have the Mountain Giant into Sunfury Protector afterwards, set up that big board.
Yeah.
Didn't have a lot of utility early on, but made the most out of his minions nonetheless.
Right. Again, there's not a high chance that Firebat would have the killing combination. Generally speaking, 70, 80% of the time, he won't have that. But if he does have that one time, you're regretting everything in life because you just threw away a game with a favorable matchup. Now, on Firebat's end, I don't think he's stressing too much. Handlock's a really tough matchup. I guess the only thing that he would be mad ultimately is that he ran that into the Handlock. But even then, even if Tempo Mage, for example, is playing that game, it'd still be a really tough matchup.
Yeah, something that is really interesting about this matchup to me is how Tempo Mage is going to line up versus the Hunter builds. I would venture to say Firebat did not suspect a bunch of Hunters were going to be coming into this stage of the tournament. Not only with Secrets Paladin being so strong, but just with Warlock, Warrior, and Druid being so strong as they were. Trump's actually got a Hunter in his build, and he's also got Flare in that Hunter deck. So right. Tempo Mage might not be the most, might not be like an easy matchup versus that deck. This, that Handlock winning match 1 may actually spell a bit of trouble for Firebat.
Well, he does have what seems to be a favorable matchup for game number 2 here. We have the Druid up against the Patron, but it feels like Druid has still been splitting games against Patron, despite the fact that we might feel otherwise. And ultimately, it could just be a 50-50 down the middle, and we're just basically using our own anecdotal experience in order to estimate the matchups.
Yeah, Trump's opening hand, he has that Wild Growth, which he definitely wants. He might even keep the Azure Drake. Probably going to send back that swipe and see if he can find something a little bit more proactive that allows him to build up the board. He does get rid of the Azure Drake, and then ends up with a Shade and Force of Nature. 2 Wild Growths. This might not be the best hand for Trump.
Yeah, this may not have been exactly what he wanted to see. 1 Wild Growth into Shade into, like, say, a 4-drop would be pretty good, or maybe even innervate into a 5 or 6-drop. But in this position, you're looking at turn 2 Wild Growth, turn 3 Shade, turn 4 Wild Growth, and then no really action behind that unless he picks up something. Meanwhile, Firebat's got a pretty excellent curve behind his hand. Trump, with a couple strong pickups here, could easily be the one in advantage this round, but, these next couple of draws really going to shake things up.
Yeah, we'll see. Trump has to curve out, but Firebat taking a very aggressive stance once again. Just very interesting to see him be this aggressive. I knew Patron originally started off more as a defensive deck, and everyone was already like, whoa, you play Frothing Berserker on turn 3, that's crazy. And people started doing that more often and realizing that's pretty good, pretty standard. But Firebat's coining Armorsmith against Druid. Like, that's super aggressive.
Yeah, I mean,
what's Armorsmith going to do, Nate?
Well, it's really the threat of what this means to Trump. Again, Trump is a very clever thinking player. And when he sees plays like this happening, he's going to consider how Inner works. He's going to consider how Cruel Taskmaster works. He's even going to think about, do I need to kill these in the face of Acolyte? He can't really discern exactly what Firebat's range is. And at the same time, Firebat will get a couple chips of damage here and there. And not to say it's that big a deal, but we've seen a lot of games decided this week over 1 or 2 points of damage. And so to see him be this aggressive early on, maybe that's part of the difference that's being made.
Definitely can agree there. Well, he does have Acolyte to tuck behind the Unstable Ghoul, seeing if maybe that that Wrath or that Keeper of the Grove will make appearance.
Yeah,
he draws cards.
This is also one of the reasons, is when you find yourself in situations like this, it becomes very difficult for the defending player to really fight this off. Trump happens to have Wrath in this situation, but imagine if he didn't have that removal spell, you'd be looking at a lot of draws and a lot of armor from Firebat.
He still gets some armor, or a little bit. Every little bit, according to what we've seen before, every little bit can really make a big difference.
Yeah.
Yeah, we see Trump does have that Ancient of War now, and he's going to curve right into it. Doesn't even play the Darnassus Aspirant, goes for the Wild Growth, which is the sure thing. If you're Trump, though, you have to be considering Ancient of War is a very big taunt. Obviously, you definitely want to put it out there, but Firebat has to execute, so...
Right, and it's also scary, too, because not only does he have the execute potential, he's going to draw cards. Ooh, that's an interesting draw, though.
That is an excellent pickup for Trump. He's going to be able to make these 2 Acolytes amount to a single card drawn, and I can tell you what, this deck is very reliant on drawing a lot of cards. Most of its deck utility is dedicated to cycling through and finding the right combinations of cards. Trump, however, is really considering the difference between making sure he denies draws and getting a 5-10 taunt on the board.
The problem is, too, is if he goes ahead and just Keeper of the Groves and he silences the Acolyte of Pain, his choices for follow-up are either Hero Power and Darnassus Aspirant, and they just don't create as strong of a board as an Ancient of War. The Ancient of War is definitely a high-reward gamble if it pays off. If there's no Execute, if there's nothing that can punish it, he pretty much gets control of the board right then and there for a while. But if there is an Execute, he spends 7 mana to basically a 1-mana answer, and that's his entire turn.
Yep, I can tell you that play looks a lot better just from a board state. Not even taking a look at the hands, just knowing your opponent has gotten 1 draw off of 2 Acolytes that's just a fantastic feeling.
Yeah, getting out the Darnassus Aspirant this early feels good too. It's not going to be something that probably generates patrons for Firebat. And it is a 2-3, so it challenges most of what's on the board. Firebat's hand is, again, it's kind of more geared towards winning the game. He has those 2 Frothing Berserkers. He might play 1 pretty soon. It's just, you were talking about, Frodan, kind of that tempo play just to get something on the board. But for the moment, his hand's a little bit awkward.
Yeah, I'm looking at if maybe he wants to shield block to draw through, but I'm also looking at what he can do board impact-wise, but it seems like he'd have to part ways with a lot, like play Frothing Berserker, Cool Task, and Enrage. And that is asking for a lot. Your opponent could swipe and you just toss away 3 cards that would help you activate Battle Rage to make it more useful. At the same time, Firebat could be like, well, he's dumped a lot of his hand. I'm going to dump a lot of my hand, and I'm just going to take it to the next level by playing an Ascended Frothing Berserker.
Something what you've seen all weekend from these decks is them kind of get, ground down to the felt, and then the last couple cards not really making that big of an impact and getting into a big top decking war. And it looks like we're headed down that direction again. Trump cannot play his 5-10 in the face of a Frothing Berserker that big.
He's gonna Force of Nature.
Yeah, now there's a chance he does Ancient Lore instead, but I think Force of Nature cleans up this board so nicely that it's pretty difficult to pass up this trade.
Absolutely. Firebat's also okay with this ultimately because your opponent's using combo pieces to clear. He won't be threatened to kill you. He's also foregoing development onto the board. And ultimately, you probably won't win through 1 Frothing anyways. It's going to be through Patron Flood and other things.
God, look at the stress in Trump's face, too. This is such a big match for him. I mean, this is likely one of the biggest matches Trump's ever played.
Certainly. I knew that, yes, last year he was not happy at all, not being able to participate as part of the BlizzCon. The points and the way Swiss worked just didn't end up lining up with Trump because he wasn't focused on it. And this year, I remember asking him, like, hey, is there anything you want to do this year, goal-wise? He says, win BlizzCon.
Yeah, I think that's a...
Told me that in January.
Goal. Yeah, I think it's a great goal.
Yeah, ever since GVG's come out, I've really seen him on his stream focusing so much more on Constructed. He's playing a lot of Paladin back in the day, a lot of Handlock, as people have said. And this has been just a totally different Trump in 2015 as far as his ambitions for the competitive scene. So I like that he kind of held off on that Force of Nature for a bit, gave it some more thought, made sure that's absolutely what he wanted to do. And, you have a full turn timer. Go ahead and use it. These are very important matches. Don't feel like you have to rush it out there.
Firebat even considering what it means to be playing a grind battle between development. And you continue to see it. Firebat always fights for the board. It seems like he will never give up a fight for the board almost no matter what.
Yeah, at the same time, though, putting down that Frothing Berserker is very scary. Obviously, he has a Grim Patron, and Grim Patron is one way you can beat Druid, but that Frothing Berserker absolutely hamstrings how much total damage you can do. So,
oh man, Innervate Swipe is a possibility to remove another threat off the board, and Firebat would just be left with only his Grim Patrons as a way to climb back into the game. I mean, at the same time, you can also just say that Firebat corners himself by trying to be so aggressive, and if his opponent just happens to have the removal, the smaller percent of the time, it still ends up making him a loss.
Yeah, I think that's a chance he's just willing to take. More often than not, your opponent isn't going to have those removal spells. And when they don't have him, a lot of times you can find yourself very heavily punishing your opponents. In his last series versus Phone Tap, there was a couple situations where Phone Tap didn't have the answer and snowballed the game into some pretty easy victories for Firebat.
Right.
Wow, Trump holds back on the Innervate Swipe. Says he needs to see a little bit more before that swipe comes out. And I can't really fault him. It's just a 2-4 right now. Firebat doesn't have a lot of cards.
Well, he may pay a major price for this one. That is a picture-perfect draw for Firebat.
Yeah. the inner rage onto the patron so that you can copy it. You have a couple of high health ones, and then you tuck it behind a stable ghoul. Not to mention that the Keeper of the Grove will also die, right? So that way he doesn't have a way to easily kill off these patrons. So that's going to mean Firebat could potentially just flood this board and then be able to ambush his opponent.
This is one of the most difficult situations for Druids to deal with. However, Trump does have Ancient of War in his hand, and Firebat doesn't have it execute at the moment. So there are a couple situations where Trump, even despite this Grim Patron wave, finds himself in an okay spot.
I see Savage Roar coming into his hand, not super relevant at the moment. Ancient of War could come down, but he sees Firebat is holding on to one card. And if that card is Execute, I mean, that's terrible.
It could be. He's been holding on to a card for a few turns now.
Right.
He didn't play it when it's like very clear that he could have played other things.
Ancient of War isn't really a cure-all with this board either. You see the Unstable Ghoul down there.
Oh, you create 6 power on the board just by attacking into this thing.
I mean, this is the kind of situation that you find yourself in when you play for the board the way Firebat did. He wouldn't have been able to take out that Keeper of the Grove, and he wouldn't have been able to have this gigantic Crawling Berserker out. That's almost kind of taunting Trump into swiping this board right now.
He certainly almost needs to swipe.
Well, hero powering it and taking 11 is an option. And
I guess you're right. He couldn't hero
honestly,
power it down in Ancient of War.
And honestly, I think that kind of play is right up Trump's alley. He understands the value of health versus cards and knows that in this matchup, you know, I mean, can you afford to swipe in this position? You're creating 4 Grim Patrons for your opponent if you do.
Definitely an arena play if you like hero power, because it's like you want to play value-wise and use your health as a resource, but I ultimately think that you need to just not take that damage and try to grind your opponent out. You have much better cards ultimately, right?
Well, he's facing down 4 Grim Patrons right now, and even with Emperor Thorson, this is a dangerous situation to be in. This really hinges on the next 2 draws from Firebat. If he can pick up some strong utility.
Oh! A Whirlwind off the top.
This is scary. This is very scary if you're in Trump's spot.
6 patrons will be on the board after this turn, and he's cleared off. Well, he's cleared off all the minions here. He's going to kill Emperor Thorson, I believe, unless he wants to go aggressive, but I'd still be scared leaving that up.
Well, honestly, at this point, Trump's hand is so low on cards, and Firebat has 6 Grim Patrons on the board. You know, maybe he pushes his 3 health one into this Emperor Thorson, but does he need to kill it at this point? What's it actually doing to the board?
It challenges his high health ones.
Yeah, and I think that's going to be the tiebreaker for him. Is what the possibility of that is.
Right.
With 4 healthy Grim Patrons out, I don't see a need to risk this whatsoever.
Trump really needs to draw that second Force of Nature right now.
Well, the Ancient of War still provides a big wall. In fact, he can play 2 walls, the Ancient of War and the Druid of the Claw. That seems to be a very good use of that Innervate right now, because before Innervate wasn't really that powerful.
Yeah, if Firebat's not sitting on the Execute, which we know he isn't, but assuming he doesn't draw into it, he's got Slam.
He's got 2 draws into it. He can draw off the top of his deck for the beginning of his turn. He can Slam and go into it. Trump is taking no prisoners. He's charging down a full health Grim Patron and sending him back to Blackrock Mountain Adventure. That's where he belongs.
And he's like, you picked the wrong game mode, friend.
Oh, wow.
All right, let's see what the Slam does. Slam into Execute.
Why would you put that Juju out there? How about into Whirlwind? I think that's going to be good enough for Firebat. 3 more Grim Patrons getting made now.
All right.
And this is, again, this was all a catalyst.
Trump's face.
The reaction, he can't believe it. This was all a catalyst from that Crawling Berserker that did not get swiped. Without that single card, you would not find this position in the game.
Just also the fact that Trump created more patrons, which created even more patrons, which got Whirlwind and created more patrons. This is an absolute disaster. There's no way for Trump to really easily seize back this board. And Druid of the Claw is just going to put a very temporary band-aid on the overarching problem that not only has he created patrons 3 ways, he's got more patrons the next turn with the Whirlwind effect off the Death Spite.
Firebat's going to tie this series up at 1 game apiece, and this shows you the power of that aggressive play. If your opponents do not have the right answers, or even if they make some, I don't know, minor missteps perhaps, you find yourself in very favorable spots, and that's what won Firebat the World Championships last year was that great aggressive play.
Right, Firebat oftentimes makes these very aggressive lines within the decks he plays, even with decks that are not necessarily designed to be as fast, and a lot of times it shakes opponents, right, because they're not sure what they're seeing. Why is this happening? And they react I guess, differently because they're not used to that scenario. And we saw it could have gone against Firebat. Ultimately, it didn't. And Trump and Firebat have very different play styles. So,
well, I think maybe Firebat and the rest of the player base, I would say I would say like 1 out of every 100 patron players would make that type of play and then follow through it the way he did. Firebat was able to take that stance, and even though it's a lower percentage chance to win, it did end up grabbing it ultimately because even though it's lower percentage chance overall, that was Firebat's best chance to win in that scenario. So it's like a very difficult way to evaluate things in the bigger picture because you always think, if I lose these resources, how do I win? And then, of course, Firebat had to get fortunate for some help with the patrons copying off the top of his deck, but that's what he was playing into. It's like this was his way to win.
Yeah, sometimes your cards don't allow you the freedom of being able to do whatever you want. As Chalky said earlier, very easy to win the game when you get those perfect draws. But what about when you get the average draws or even the slightly below average draws? A lot of the world's best players are able to turn those games into wins, and I frankly think that may have been what you just saw.
Exactly. I witnessed a game that it felt like it was Trump's. He had an Ancient of War. He had an Ancient of Lore. His opponent only had a Frothing Berserker and a Grim Patron. And he converted that. I mean, it was, turning 2 loaves into fish and defeating thousands. In this case, defeating thousands of patrons. A lot of double entendre there. Well, Trump goes for the Hunter and tries to see if he can take out the Mage. This is going to be a little tricky. Mana Worm to start things off for Firebat is very good, but he needs more than just Flame Strike and Loatheb.
Yeah, this is the matchup I was really worried about for Firebat's perspective. Is Trump has a copy of Flare in here and also has a tracking to help dig for that. Not only that, but sometimes this Mage deck does not line up very well versus what Hunter's trying to do. If they get off to a blistering start, you don't have a couple of early game cards, you're going to get run over. So this is really going to come down to how the first couple of turns of this unfold, and whether or not Firebat has to rely on a secret or whether or not he's just going to be able to power through with some strong 4-drops.
Yeah, I would expect Firebat to go in there kind of looking for Flame Waker really early, something that allows him to contest the board long before Flame Strike. Flame Strike can be a great card against Hunter, but a lot of times he can come in just a little bit too late, so Flame Waker does allow him to contest board, deal with some of the lower HP minions that mid-range Hunter is going to play. He keeps the Mana Worm, obviously you don't get rid of that, and he ends up with 2 Fireballs and a Shredder, which is really not what you want at all in your opening.
You said 4 drops, right?
Yeah.
Well, 4 drops, not for,
I dropped that Fireball in a minion anytime, any day. Also, another very subtle thing that Trump did that people we didn't talk about, so they might have missed, is that Trump also threw away tracking. And tracking is really powerful as the game develops because even though you could play it on turn 1, the problem is you're not sure if you need tracking immediately.
Wow, this is a really interesting play from Trump. I mean, he has straight away coined into Eaglehorn Bow to start taking care of these Mana Worms. Instead, he's elected to go for Mad Scientist. So this is going to put Firebat in a spot where he's going to have to figure out whether or not he wants to push damage or trade with the Mad Scientist. Makes a pretty rare situation where he starts trading, but a pretty strong read. He realizes that if Trump does have Eaglehorn Bow, it's pretty tough to really climb out of that situation.
I think he wants to also protect the Sorcerer's Apprentice. Saying,
Yeah.
like, even if he does or doesn't have Bow, the point is I don't want Sorcerer's Apprentice to die very easily and ultimately make my Mana Worms very vulnerable. So I think this is a pretty appropriate line for Firebat to take this trade.
Yeah, and going over to Firebat's hand, he's going to have a lot more options coming up on this turn 4. Piloted Shredder is going to come out, unless he draws something better.
Right.
It's going to allow him to put a lot of pressure on the board. Might test to see what the secret is first, although he probably knows if he's gone ahead and seen what Trump has been playing.
Yeah, but he doesn't need to attack because he doesn't have very favorable follow-ups. He gets 1 extra damage by attacking now, versus next turn he can force the bow to not attack, and then attack, have 5 power afterwards to evaluate what he needs to do.
Yeah, that's also assuming this is Freezing Trap.
Oh, good point. Good point.
Firebat doesn't exactly know what these are.
Could be Snake Trap.
It could also potentially be Explosive Trap. I don't know if we've seen all of Trump's secrets this event. It's a possibility we have. I know that we have seen Freezing and Snake. But outside of that, not 100% read on what these are.
And Trump not going to play too greedy and assume that his opponent will trigger the weapon charge. Instead, just immediately picks it off. Flame Waker is good on paper, but not in this scenario because you don't have a spell to actually couple it with.
Well, we just got some news that that secret is in fact Snake Trap. So we may see a little bit of a different gameplay.
I mean, it could be Snipe, but it's not. But it's not.
Archon was playing Snipe in their Hunter decks for quite a while.
The value of snipe is that nobody
Oh, you're
expects it to be
serious?
Yeah,
snipe.
no, they were really playing it. They were making.
I thought you were winking at me or something.
No, they were making
a-
great use of it, just as a strong tempo play. They were just picking off piloted shredders, then using the bow to take out the second half.
That's definitely one way to handle a piloted shredder.
That's good.
I wonder if Trump's going to seek a way to kill out this Flame Waker immediately with the kill command and just try to fill out the rest of the mana curve with some of the cheaper mana spells here.
Yeah, none of these three are really going to kill it, but this will solidify his game afterwards.
Ooh.
And Savannah Highmane, extremely powerful if he can manage to go even in this game. And given his hand context, it looks like he's going to be able to kill command on that Flame Waker, a Web Spinner, and a Haunted Creeper out. I think he may have full control of this game.
Yeah, Firebat does have burn, though. That is something that is nice.
Yeah, he may end up burning a Savannah Highmane, though.
It's possible. But, you know, if there's one thing I do know about Firebat, it's that he loves to push damage and put his opponents in uncomfortable spots. This may be one of the games he tries to do it, but even if that happens, Trump's got Houndmaster and Lotheb to try to shut that down.
Yeah, it's almost certain that his hand is telling him to be aggressive. He's got 2 Fireballs. He's got Dr. Boom to follow it up. So he's going to try to position himself where he's playing these threats and forcing his opponent to react to them and hopefully trade into his minions as opposed to the other way around.
Yeah. And I think Firebat's considering fireballing here and what the trade-offs actually mean for it. But I would venture to say in this position, if he fireballs, his game plan is pretty much given up at this point. And that may not be something he wants to commit to quite yet or let Trump know that he has in mind.
It's also one of those things where, because you know it's Snake Trap, it doesn't feel very good at all to trade. And as you guys have already said, his hand is very aggressive, right? He has Dr. Boom next turn. The question is whether or not he fireballs now, but that Snake Trap may not even get fracked this game.
Well, Firebat's not exactly the most subtle player I've ever had the pleasure of watching play.
He actually told me one time that he thinks it's 100% correct to always set up 2-turn lethals, assuming you don't die immediately. And he says he doesn't care how aggressive or subtle or discreet it is. Just do it.
Yeah.
So sometimes it involves swiping the face twice in turn 8 so you can combo it. Do it.
Well,
if that's the right line. So
I've been there before, and I've certainly played against him when he's doing that too. It's not a comfortable position to be in.
Yeah, once you kind of show your opponent that you're definitely looking to kill them on the next turn, things can get a little bit dicey. But, you know, we've seen a lot of players over the course of this tournament be forced in that position. Bloody Face against Reynad basically sent Reynad a text and was like, hey, next turn, me, you, Savage Roar combo and chill. And, you know, Reynad obviously tried to ward against it. And it doesn't always pan out for the player who's making that aggressive line. But if you don't do that, what else are you going to do? Your hand doesn't cater to any other play.
Yep.
Quickly.
it looks like Trump's going to take advantage of Effigy now and copy the Mana Worm.
I think that he's just going to go straight for the face. He does choose to trade. Interesting.
Oh, it's
Checking
counterspell.
for, yeah, checking for Effigy there.
Could be
Yeah.
Mirror Entity as well.
Trump has a perfect counter for the coin, though. Or, sorry, for counterspell.
Well, that Arcane Missiles, ironically, is a pretty good draw.
Counterspell perfectly counters the coin.
That's a good point.
Savage Combatant also picked up off the Web Spinner. I didn't realize that was a beast.
Like I said, everyone's running in this tournament,
It's pretty good.
including Rexar.
I was saying that Savage Combatant is pretty nasty as a web spinner because you can continue to push out a lot of damage early on. But now Trump is presented with another problem. It's like, well, do I address this Lotheb? Where do I have room to be aggressive? Do I have room to be aggressive? Firebat has only one goal in mind. That's to punish his opponent as hard as he can for damage.
This is a tough spot to be in. I mean, Trump honestly has to consider what are the odds that my opponent can just kill my Haunted Creeper and then kill me. I mean, Firebat literally just launched a fireball in his face on turn 6 when Trump was at 18. You know, that's, again, it's not very subtle. I think the hands are face up right now. Trump's just trying to figure out what's the best way to actually get through it.
Yeah, I think he can interpret, like, my opponent probably has, like, a Frostbolt or another Fireball. Trump's trying to figure out the sequencing here. He doesn't want to trigger the knives from the Knife Juggler and ultimately kill the Boombots. He needs to also move quick. He also has to be careful of the trap. Or the secret, excuse me. It's not a trap.
Oh, man.
Looks like the Knife Juggler did survive based off the way he's targeting, and he's going to set up the high main, setting up a date with Boombot and the face. But will that connection land? No!
Well, he's down to 10. Is Firebat feeling frisky this turn?
He hypothetically has lethal.
Is Firebat feeling frisky this turn?
We've seen it before in this tournament. Arcane Missiles has basically like an 80% chance to go face.
It's actually a 1% chance to go. If they hit 5 3 times to the face and 5 targets, right?
Well, this is still a pretty good sequence, I think, for Firebat. He is going to drop Trump down to 8. And sitting at 23 health, I think he feels pretty darn comfortable about this position.
It's important to note that the Lotheb also doesn't actually block the fireball on the next turn.
It does, though, in the sense that it blocks... Oh, you're right, because he won't
be able to hero power with it.
Right, he can't kill anyways. It blocks a potential Frostbolt top deck, though, for example.
Oh, please give us the Howling, or not Howling, the Houndmaster onto Savage Combatant.
Oh, there's a Savage Combatant.
That's not even a beast, that's a druid. That Houndmaster is... Oh, no, he doesn't even do it.
Yeah, I
mean... He's the hyena.
He's just going to push for damage, and this, honestly, Firebat is in a bad position right now.
Yeah.
I don't know if Firebat can actually win this game. I think that Lotheb's about to just shut
15.
him out.
Trump.
No, he's got 17 damage just for on board, right?
Yeah.
So Firebat has to fireball the 5/4. Otherwise, he dies to just what's on board here. And then Trump realizes, like, please don't have Fireball Frostbolt, because he knows that he probably has one of those pieces, but just don't top deck it. Fireball has to go on the highest attack minion.
Yeah, Trump feels safe right now. So he goes, you know what? It doesn't take Firebat this long to count to 8. I think I got this one.
Yeah.
Yeah, so Firebat kind of in a awful position now. How do you even climb back into it?
Well, it's probably going to have to climb back in game number 4 because Trump is way out in the lead right now.
Wait. He's still going to play Lotheb instead, though, because ultimately it's the safest play up against, like, Arcane Intellect into weird stuff.
Or even just say, like, there's a random Pyroblast in here.
I was going to say.
Well, I mean, like, say, like realistically, like, he gets Arcane Intellect and 2 Frostbolts, and then the Shredder suicides into a Spell Power minion, right?
Well, I can tell you,
there are those weird fringe scenarios.
I can tell you what, Archmage, Firebat does require some assistance, but he needed it a lot earlier than right now. Firebat has no way to climb out of this one, and Trump takes a 2-1 lead in the series.
So he's down to his Druid deck, I believe, up against Firebat's Mage and Firebat's Druid himself. So he's going to have to win the Mirror as well up against Tempo Mage. 2 matchups which could go either way, although we're starting to favor Firebat's Mage over the Druid these days.
Yeah, I would tend to think so. If he's going to build this Tempo Mage deck, I would venture to say that Druid was definitely a class he had in mind. I feel like he's definitely favored in that one. What it's really going to hinge on to me is this Druid matchup. You know, whoever gets ahead and whoever's willing to be more aggressive and not be the first one to blink, as long as they have the tools to follow up, they're usually at a big advantage.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting how that game ended up going. You pointed out Flare in Trump's deck. It was never even a factor. And in the end, I wonder if Firebat even remembered that Trump had that secret up. It had just been so long. And I had said there was a world where that Snake Trap just didn't actually get procced. It did end up getting procced in the end. Didn't really matter too much.
It was this world, by the way, Rob.
Right.
Just to clarify.
Right, so it was. It did actually happen. So yeah, secrets didn't really play that much of a role in that game.
Yeah, I know. We speculated Flare on the effigy, neither of which really mattered. In fact, Counterspell didn't even get activated because he never coined.
Yeah, well, Trump never had a kill command.
So Trump played perfectly around it by never activating the Counterspell. These guys are playing so high level.
It's possible.
Well, I mean, if you are Trump, and you did see that Firebat had the Counterspell in his deck.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's certainly a consideration if you don't feel you need the coin.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't need it that game. It was really just a matter of the curve being so strong.
Yeah, the reality is, it's not like there's some high-level thing like he didn't want to reveal the coin. Like there's lots of ways that Trump could have played around a bunch of other secrets, and he tried to test if it activated on the important ones. Okay, no effigy. Okay, no mirror entity. I should be good.
This is going to be it though for Firebat if he can't win this next match. He's got to go ahead and get this next win against Trump. For Trump, it's just a matter of winning with this last deck, his Druid deck. And then he's clinched his spot at the Americas Championship.
Yep. I wonder if Firebat's expended his luck maybe in the last series. Bone Tap was up 2-0.
Yeah.
And then he 3-0'd him from behind.
No, I mean, he still had some really good showings with the Patron, being able to get the Whirlwinds and back-to-back draws, practically speaking. He did have to cycle for it. But we'll see. We'll see. Druid versus Mage, one more time that we've seen it already, and we'll see it again. Trump is 1 game away from staying home in the Bay Area to play in the Americas Regionals.
I was going to say, Trump is 1 win away from a short 5-minute drive to the Folsom
He has
Street
to get
boundary.
on the BART train.
He will have to wake up and put on pants and drive to this place that is very near to his home.
Oh, I don't want to go anymore if I do that.
Yeah, sorry. I'll get hit you up later about that, but
tough opening hand, I'd say here for Trump. I mean, he does have option for Tincture Pilot Shredder, but also has option for turn 5 Doctor Boom. which is a pretty huge one. But, you know, outside of the Innervate, doesn't have Wild Growth, doesn't have Darnassus Aspirant. So can get ahead early, but it's not really a big sustained lead unless that threat goes unchecked. This is a tough spot for him going first.
Yeah, not to mention that your opponent is most likely going to be pushing an early game board. So, you know, having cards like Dr. Boom can get answered. It's kind of weird to think about. It's like, oh yeah, Innervate turn 5 Dr. Boom, but he already has Flame Waker, Sorcerer's Apprentice, and Mana Worms, and actually Dr. Boom didn't do anything.
Yeah, we can see Firebat has options on this first turn. He could look into coining out the Mad Scientist, but obviously the coin is a very valuable resource in conjunction with the Flame Waker.
Yeah.
He has Arcane Intellect, which will allow him to later on get value out of the Flame Waker as well. But yeah, Trump
gets the Wild Growth.
Trump drew a pretty good card there.
Yeah, this does
Dangerous for Firebat.
This does punish his keep a little bit though. Doesn't get the Piloted Shredder out just this turn. So it allows Firebat a turn to, you know, maybe do something to get himself on board and maybe contest his stuff. So Trump
now,
does have the Keeper of the Grove into this, but you know that's going to leave the Piloted Shredder on board.
Very curious to see if Counterspell plays a big role in this matchup. Obviously, he doesn't have the coin to throw away, and most of Druid's spells are kind of absolutely required, right? When you need to use them, you need to use them. You don't really have any good throwaway spells. Very interested to see what role that plays. Right now, though, Firebat's staring down a Piloted Shredder. Trump doesn't really have any great turn 5 options. He could look into possibly silencing the Mad Scientist, assuming it's still alive. But curious to see what Firebat does here. Could just put out his own Shredder. Looks like that's what he's going to do.
Yeah. So once again, drawn 2 Fireballs as well. In this matchup, I think they're a little bit better than they are in the Hunter matchup. But still, mucking up his hand pretty early on.
They're certainly better because there's a lot of mid-range minions from the Druid side, with that being one of them. In fact, Druid of the Claw is the primary target you Fireball. 6 damage, 6 health, taunt, gets in the way, and you can make proper trades. The only thing is that normally you start off a little bit quicker. You have Mana Worms early on, maybe Sorcerer's Apprentice, so they can gain some tempo, squeeze in an Unstable Portal. That's where the mage really gets its edge. Not to mention the secret that usually comes out as well out of the Mad Scientist.
Interesting. So Trump's going to favor using the silence here on the Piloted Shredder rather than the Keeper of the Grove. And that's very, very unique to me.
Yeah,
that is starting to push damage on the face. I like this from Trump.
Yeah, he's choosing to play off curve, and that's a really bold move. And again, it's not a very obvious play, nor is it a path that many people take. And Trump wants to carve out this as his road to BlizzCon. And if he can ride away this tempo train, it might pay off huge dividends because Druid the Claw here won't it be as punishing? Because normally when you Fireball the Druid the Claw, it's because your board is going to be at a big advantage. But if you Fireball the Druid the Claw, you still have a pretty dominant board position afterwards.
Firebat punches right back, though.
Right, and this is kind of an interesting position in the Druid versus Mage mechanic. We see here, the Mage is the one with all the cards, and the Druid has none because Firebat didn't have those early minions like Mana Worm to curve out and use a bunch of spells on.
Yet another counter spell has been pulled out. We know that the chances were higher because Firebat is holding Effigy, but still, I believe he's running 2 in the deck.
Is there just no Mirror Entity in this build? Because Trump has so far not been afraid of it whatsoever.
No, there's no Mirror Entity because Firebat is so insistent upon his own Effigy and tempo, like Toshli, like Ronin, like Water Elementals. And by that, you don't really need Mirror Entity to seize tempo because you're just protecting your board at all times.
Right, and the Effigy works really well with the higher mana minions he is using. He has Toshli in hand. You mentioned Ronin. Even Water Elemental at 4 can usually give you a good tempo swing.
Well, just look at the consequence of what Trump did earlier on. Because he went off curve, he's rewarded with an Ancient War top deck, and we're talking about how he minimized the impact of the damage of a Fireball to the Druid of the Claw, because normally, when you're able to land Fireball on Druid of the Claw when you have a board, that's very good for the Tempo Mage.
Yeah, so a lot of damage on Trump's side of the board right now. Firebat going to have to rely on Toshli, but this is a dangerous position to be in. 11 points of damage available just in minions for Trump.
I think that oh no, the counter spell.
Yeah.
Oh, right, because it's like, oh, he has lethal, guys.
But that's a swipe top deck.
Trump, if he can detect the counterspell, triggers in the right sequence, then Trump will be going to the North American Regionals.
Wait, 11? Oh my gosh, he doesn't have the mana to hero power.
Oh, you're right. He doesn't have enough. He has only 8 mana. He can't trigger the counterspell and be able to squeeze in the hero power, but he can put him down to 1.
I wonder.
Wow, this is I think you go for it. I mean, this is a good a time as ever to get this Savage Roar off.
Counterspell has been activated, so here comes 19 damage, Firebat.
Wow, Trump gonna set Firebat down to 1, and if Firebat doesn't get an insane unstable portal, that's gonna do it. Trump's gonna be knocking him out and
What does he do?
solidifying his own spot. He's gotta rely on the unstable portal.
Yeah, it's got to be unstable portal right here.
What can he even do, though? He needs to land something really big, a big taunt
Doomsayer,
minion.
maybe. No, even a Doomsayer doesn't save him.
That's it!
That's not enough.
Oh, he was hoping for a Doomsayer off the Pilot Shredder, but looks like Firebat has been cornered. This is the world champ's last stand.
There's actually no way out of this. Firebat has no way to win. He throws the played, and Trump is going to regionals, knocking the world champion out of the North American Qualifier tournament.
TSM Trump coming all the way here in 2015 and punching his ticket to the regional finals. Congratulations, taking down the world champ. It can't feel any better than that.
I mean,
It can't.
He's
literally the final boss.
Yeah, I mean, this is exactly what I was talking about prior to the match. Firebat was the world champion last year, but I think Trump is truly the most improved player in 2015, and this is a prime example of it. Trump used to be very defensive, be very focused on value. In this match, we saw him turn up the heat. We saw him put Firebat in uncomfortable positions, even if it wasn't necessarily the best turn-by-turn play he could have made. Just making Firebat play off curve himself and make him play defensively. Just great aggressive play from Trump.
Yeah, what a great story for Trump this year. As I said earlier, really, since GVG, turning the corner on his side, he really cares about competitive play. He really wants to be one of the best in North America, if not the world. And now he's going to get the chance to prove it along with other players from Latin America and North America at the Americas Championship in San Francisco.
Yeah, what a story on both ends, too. You know, this is a little bit sad and disappointing that Firebat couldn't go back to regionals, even though he had one step away. Like, he was super close to be able to get to that regional finals. But again, another great performance, getting to the top 8 of the region. It's as if, you know, if the regionals extended just a little bit longer, right, where we had 8 players from each region, he'd already be there in San Francisco. So this is nothing to be ashamed of at all. A great repeat performance here from Firebat in 2015. Looking forward to see what he's got for 2016. But the moment belongs to the mayor of Valuetown. Congratulations, Trump. You are the last person to go to regionals in October in the San Francisco Foundry. We'll see you guys there. We're pretty much done, though, with the broadcast. I mean, that's it. We have our 6 players joining along the 2 players that we have from Latin America.
Yeah, Korea and Morgul are going to be the 2 players joining along from that region. Both of them from Brazil, from what I understand, and really looking forward to see them play. Not a lot of coverage of that scene available, just on an everyday basis. Something I haven't had the pleasure of really paying that much attention to, so I can't wait to see them play.
Yeah, they were streamed on the official Play Hearthstone channels as well, so you can go check it out. But this is it. I believe this also wraps up almost every single player that we'll see in the regional finals, which will ultimately cut down to BlizzCon in November. I'm really happy and excited to see how everything is shaping up to be for the year. We've had some great stories from North America. We've had Purple qualify, Hot Form, VLPS. We've just saw Trump be able to qualify. We also have just a great mix of players from all over the world too. I'm happy to see the talent pool be able to rise up with some rising player names and some established players' names who's been there for a long time.
Yeah, we even have one returning player from the Americas Championship last year in Jab.
Yeah, I mean, what a performance that has to be,
Yeah.
qualifying back-to-back years to get to the regional portion. Last year he fell just short, but I think he's got some more plans in mind for this one.
And then some of these dark horses too. Gira over in Europe, for example, we don't really know too much about him. The only reason why I know him is because he lost to Gara. Gira and Gara. There's a little bit of wordplay there. But he was telling me, he's like, yeah, the guy I lost to end up qualifying for it, as well as really top players like Maverick, Light Coach, Hoy, etc. And then, we have our own dark horse in North America, too, Nias. Well, we don't know too much about him, but he's been playing an anti-patron lineup without Warrior. And him and Trump, 2 players who defied the odds. They said, no Warrior, and they got through. That's such an admirable feat.
Yeah, I mean, I that's admirable.
And that's how we'll wrap it up. Thanks so much, everybody, for watching. This has been a production here done by ESL. Thanks so much for them to support us, as well as Twitch and Blizzard. One more time, go check out the Amazon App Store discount. You get a discount that you get only this weekend. If you go to Amazon.com/Hearthstone, 20% off on your coins. Do it while you have the last few hours to do so. Robert, final words.
Great tournament. Super excited. Enjoyed everything I saw. I can very much say that every single player who has made it to the Americas Championship absolutely deserves to be there, and I can't wait to see all of you guys in San Francisco.
Nathan?
Just a great event. Happy to see it. Love to always see the new names coming up, and want Wow, this regionals. Can't wait to see who's going to be champion of the Americas and represent us at BlizzCon.
Absolutely. It's been fun. It's been real fun. Thank you so much, everybody, for watching. We'll see you guys next time in San Francisco for the North American Regionals. From Frodan, Admirable, and Worth, and everybody here at the ESL Studios in Burbank, California, thanks for watching, and we'll see you guys next time.